A massive shift may be happening inside the North American auto industry. One of the world's largest car manufacturers, General Motors, has made a decision that shocked workers, economists, and industry experts across Canada. The company has shut down all of its remaining manufacturing operations in the country. This wasn't a simple restructuring. It wasn't a temporary slowdown. Entire assembly plants, engineering centers, and parts facilities were closed. Factories that had been operating for decades suddenly stopped production. For communities like Oshawa and St. Catharines, these facilities were far more than just industrial buildings. They were the economic foundation of entire cities. More than 11,000 workers instantly lost their jobs. But what makes this situation even more controversial is that these factories were not failing. Many of them were considered some of the most efficient facilities in GM's global manufacturing network. They were profitable, they produced high-quality vehicles, and they had experienced workforces with decades of expertise. So why shut them down? To understand that decision, we need to step back and look at the bigger picture. The global auto industry is currently undergoing one of the biggest transformations in its history. For more than a century, the industry was built around gasoline engines, but now the entire system is shifting toward electric vehicles. This transition is not just about technology, it's about supply chains, raw materials, government incentives, and global political influence. Electric vehicles require massive amounts of battery minerals like lithium, cobalt, and nickel, and countries that control those resources suddenly hold enormous strategic power. At the same time, governments are investing billions of dollars to attract EV manufacturing. The United States has introduced major incentives for companies that produce electric vehicles domestically. Those incentives include tax credits, infrastructure funding, and large manufacturing grants. For companies like GM, these incentives represent billions of dollars in potential financial support, and that has created a new kind of pressure inside the industry. Manufacturers must decide where to locate their production facilities, because where you build vehicles today may determine whether you receive government incentives tomorrow. In that environment, production location becomes a strategic decision, and according to several reports, companies were increasingly encouraged to bring manufacturing back to the United States. For GM, that meant reassessing operations outside the country, and Canada became part of that calculation. Despite decades of successful manufacturing history, the company announced it would close its remaining Canadian operations. Factories that had been operating for generations suddenly went quiet. Workers who had spent decades on assembly lines were informed their jobs would disappear. For many families, the impact was immediate and deeply personal. Some workers had spent their entire career in those factories. Their parents had worked there. Their communities had grown around those plants. Local businesses depended on factory workers as customers. Restaurants, shops, service providers, and small suppliers all relied on the economic activity generated by those plants. When a major factory closes, the effects ripple across the entire region. Economists often estimate that every auto manufacturing job supports 3 or 4 additional jobs in the surrounding economy. That means the loss of 11,000 direct jobs could affect tens of thousands of families. Entire communities suddenly face economic uncertainty. But what happened next surprised the entire industry. Instead of negotiating to keep GM in Canada, the government took a different approach. Within just a few days, officials announced a massive industrial strategy worth approximately $12 billion. The plan wasn't designed to bring GM back. It was designed to build something new. Canada began developing a strategy to replace the lost manufacturing capacity with a new electric vehicle ecosystem. Rather than relying on a single company, the goal was to attract multiple international automakers, and interest started appearing quickly. Major global manufacturers began exploring potential partnerships and investments. Companies such as Volkswagen, Toyota, Hyundai Motor Company have all been connected to discussions about expanding production in Canada. The idea behind the strategy is straightforward. The same factory locations abandoned by GM could become new production sites for competing automakers. The same infrastructure could be reused, the same workforce could be retrained for new electric vehicle manufacturing. But the plan goes even deeper than that. Canada also holds a major strategic advantage in the global EV transition: natural resources. The country controls significant reserves of critical battery minerals such as nickel, lithium, and cobalt. These materials are essential components for electric vehicle batteries. Without them, large-scale EV production simply cannot happen. Because of this, supply chains for these minerals have become one of the most important strategic issues in the global auto industry. Governments and manufacturers around the world are competing to secure reliable sources of these materials. Canada's mineral resources could therefore play a major role in shaping the future of EV production. New policies may influence how those resources are exported and which manufacturers receive priority access. Companies that invest in Canadian production could gain long-term advantages. Companies that leave could potentially face higher costs or supply limitations. For GM, that possibility raises an important question. Did the company sacrifice long-term strategic advantages for short-term political alignment? In the short term, moving production closer to the United States may help the company benefit from federal EV incentives. But over the long term, supply chains and mineral access may become even more important. And that's why analysts are watching this situation very closely. For Canada, the shutdown represents a difficult moment. Thousands of workers suddenly face uncertainty. Communities built around manufacturing must adapt to change. But the government's response suggests they see the shutdown as an opportunity to rebuild the industry in a new way. Instead of relying heavily on one American manufacturer, the goal is to create a diversified automotive ecosystem, multiple companies, multiple technologies, and stronger integration with the electric vehicle supply chain. For GM, the long-term consequences remain uncertain. The company is betting that aligning production with U.S. incentives will strengthen its competitive position. But if Canada successfully builds a new EV manufacturing ecosystem with multiple global partners, the decision could reshape the competitive landscape, because in an industry as large and complex as automotive manufacturing, supply chains often determine the future.